Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear. I wanted to do a kind of final wrap-up review on the Spyderco Paysan. When I did my first impressions video on this knife, it was still wearing this clip, but it was anodized purple. If you want to see how I took the anodization off of that clip, I've got a how-to video on that. But I've had the chance to keep this knife in pocket quite a bit. I've done very light cutting with it. I knew when I got it this wasn't going to be a user for me. This knife is just too pretty and too expensive for my tastes to be a user. You can judge me for that if you want to. Some people think you should use everything you buy. But I knew this was just kind of a knife I really wanted to check out, that I wanted to own for a little bit and be able to experience. But frankly, this probably isn't even a knife that I'm going to keep for very long. With that in mind, I will say it is one of my favorite knives I have ever owned. Even though I may be selling this soon, that's not because it's any kind of a dig on the knife. This knife has just kind of blown me away. Its overall fit and finish, quality, feel, has been so much fun for me. There's so much that I love about this knife and not really much at all that I would change about it. After having it in pocket quite a bit, I can say that it carries, for me, like a dream. This knife is just excellent in pocket. The profile of it, the smoothness of it, the way the clip is angled, the way everything is relatively thin about it. I just love the way that this knife carries. Every time I've had it in pocket, I've really enjoyed it. I will say that the edge that came on it is spectacular. I've put it just through some paper and super light packaging, and it is crazy sharp. But the one real downfall of the knife that I will give it is the thickness behind the edge. This knife doesn't really glide through material like other thinner ground knives do. So I've seen a lot of people who have these have done regrinds on them, whether that means they've added a hollow grind or they've done like a taller flat grind, just removed some material in general. And I've seen most people report that it really enhances the knife. Now, I'm probably not going to send mine off to do that to it, although I think if I were to own this knife forever and plan on using it a ton, that's probably what I would do. So yeah, I think that's really, at least in my opinion, the only kind of downfall of the Paysan. But if you're someone like me who wants to buy this knife to fidget with and to just kind of enjoy for the piece that it is, then I think it's certainly worth it. It's just a fantastic knife. Yeah, I wish that I had enough disposable income to justify keeping knives like this for a really long time. But the way, pardon me, the way that I am able to experience knives of this caliber is by trading and selling. So in order for me to experience another knife this expensive, I will have to inherently sell this one to move on to the next thing. Now, that doesn't mean I'm gonna like the next thing more, but that's part of what's fun of it, is just experiencing a bunch of different knives of this caliber and at this kind of price point. So yeah, my final thoughts of the Paysan are that it's awesome. It melts into my hand. It feels fantastic to me in a saber grip, in a hammer grip, in a reverse grip, in a reverse grip with a draw cut, forward grip with a draw cut. No matter how I put this knife into my hand, it's comfortable. I think a huge part of that is the integral construction. I really like this clip on it. I think it suits the knife really well, especially now that I've taken the color off of it. I think it just looks money on there. The blade finish is gorgeous. It's this kind of mirrored stone wash, and it really just, I feel like it adds to the overall aesthetic of the knife. I love that it's monochrome and simple, but it's eye-catching. Every time I take a picture of this knife, or every time I'm even just carrying it and playing with it, I can't help but just love to look at it. I think it's a fantastic looking knife. Probably one of the best looking knives I've ever owned. The action, in my opinion, is stellar. I talked about this in my first impressions. A lot of people complain about the detent being a little light. For me, since this isn't a flipper, it doesn't bother me. I can't stand it when flippers have light detents. I find that super annoying. But with this one just being a Spidey hole for deployment, I think the detent is fine. It really works well for me. A lot of people say you can shake it out, and you can, but I've had no issues with it coming loose in my pocket or anything like that. I think the detent is fine. Frankly, why it shakes out is probably largely because that blade is so heavy. This has some really thick blade stock on it. I haven't put my calipers on it or anything. I'm sure if you wanted to find out exactly how thick that blade stock is, the answer is certainly out there, whether from Spyderco or from somebody else's video review, but it's beefy. It's a really thick blade stock, but I kind of feel like, I don't know, as much as the geometry and the thickness behind the edge is partially to blame because of that thick blade stock, when I hold this knife and feel it in hand, the meatiness of that blade, I feel like does make it feel more expensive to me. I know that weight doesn't always equal expensive. In fact, a lot of times the process of making something lighter is an expensive thing to do. But in this instance, the way that that blade, this just massive slab of S90V, feels so substantial, it definitely feels like you're getting a lot of really great blade steel, which with how expensive this knife is pretty crazy. But yeah, so the Paysan is a fantastic knife. If you're someone who collects Spydercos or collects high-end production folders, or just who this design language speaks to and you're kind of on the fence about it, I can certainly recommend it. I have loved owning this knife, and I'm not ready to let go of it quite yet, although I probably will soon, just because I get the itch fast to try something else. But I'm so glad that I got to experience this knife and say that I've owned one and take some cool pictures with it, and it's just been one of my favorite knives that I've ever handled and owned and played with. Yeah, really like the Paysan. I feel like I'm just kind of rambling a little bit, so I'm going to cut it about here. But if I were to give it a 1 out of 1 to 10 rating, I should say, I'd probably rate the Paysan like a solid, I don't know, 7 or 8, which is pretty fantastic for a production knife. I really like it. It's just so dialed in. Everything about this knife feels intentional. Nothing feels like it was really overlooked to me, except for maybe that blade grind, I guess you could say. But yeah, everything about it feels really nice. Makes me want to have an actual custom Paysan from Peter Rassenti. I'd love to check one of those out and see how it compares. But if it's anything like this, then I'm definitely going to like it. So there you go. One more glamour shot. That is the Spyderco Paysan.